Hey everyone, it's Sarah DeHaven here with EA Zoom meetings to present shadow work and the malignant feminine and astrological approach. Thanks so much again for being here. This is, this is not an often talked about topic. There are psychologists and scholars who have looked into this work, but I've not really seen too much of it from an astrological perspective. So we're going to kind of look into that today. Here's an outline. So we've got the malignant feminine, toxic masculinity slash patriarchy's unspoken partner in crime, I guess we could say. And so why are we talking about this today? Good question. The reason why I feel it's important to talk about is because it's not really being talked about. We hear a lot about toxic masculinity, we talk about the patriarchy, we hear that, but as we know, at least those of us who study natural law, there is, duality in this world, in the sense there is masculine and feminine, or yin and yang, whatever you would prefer to qualify it as. And so if there's toxicity in one, there's going to be toxicity in the other based on the nature of our reality. So we're going to look into that today to really raise awareness. I want to say, though, it's so important, and I'll get into this a bit more in the next slide, to understand that we're looking at the malignant, so it's not going to be a really, we could say, fun walk through the park. This is really about self-discovery and self-awareness. And when I talk about the feminine, although I will be focusing on women, this can manifest in everybody because everyone has yin and yang energy, right? So we're going to look into distortions and inversions of the feminine polarity and how it manifests, and some theories to consider that we'll kind of be touching on throughout the presentation. How did pathology develop in the female psyche? And of course, mother's impact during utero is going to have a big piece of that, impact on that. Erich Neumann, a psychologist, talks about this quite extensively. He's worth looking into. And Michael Tessarian is another one who's done extensive research on this as well. His book, Dragon Mother, highly recommended. And so, yeah, we're going to look into that, and also kind of talk about the concept of the pre-shift into the patriarchal aeon and then the subsequent patriarchal aeon. But we're going to be looking at it more from a modern perspective. And then, of course, we're going to take a peek into the astrology of the malignant feminine through the feminine signs. And so a little bit about me. Who am I? Again, I'm Sarah DeHaven. I'm an independent astrologer, huge fan and student of evolutionary astrology. I'm an associate member of the Evolutionary Astrology Network, run by Kim Marie Weimer. I'm a student of the School of Evolutionary Astrology, Jeffrey Wolf Green School. And aside from that, I do work as an independent astrologer and a psychic intuitive guide. So I want to say that it's really important. I need to preface and disclaimer the crap out of this, pardon my language, but although I've come in to present on this topic, what I'm sharing is in no way affiliated directly with any group. These are my findings and findings that I respect from venerated sources. And I think it's valuable information, but I just want to say, like, I don't know if you ever watched those like infomercials back in the day where they would say this product is not, necessarily condoned by the television station that's airing this commercial. I just want to say, again, these are my findings. So, come to me if there's anything you'd like to ask or if you have comments. All right, so a few things before proceeding. Okay, so although again, as I am focusing on women, the information being disseminated can very well apply to both men and women, and all let me see here, sorry. Yes, all self-identified genders, as we all have feminine and masculine in us. So this is important to know, even though, again, focusing on women, it's not just about women. It's not about blaming one gender or one sex over another. This is about balancing perspective. Like I said, it's to increase holistic awareness, right? And yeah, to for those who desire to contribute their lives and lifestyles to the best possible outcomes for all beings on the planet in alignment with natural laws and principles. This again, this comes from my opinion, and also how I see things, in the sense that as we align with natural laws and principles, the more likely we will be manifesting healthy outcomes, not just in our own personal life experience, but in the aggregate in the world and for generations to come. So that's where I'm coming from with this. Many emotions will potentially be stirred that could make it difficult to actually hear what I'm saying. This is important to be aware of. Um, Cognitive dissonance can be a thing with this. I just want to bring it up because, again, like I said, this is difficult information to go through. I got to be honest, I don't even really want to talk about this, but I know I have to. And I don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable, you know? Anger can come up, feelings of being offended, which can lead into immediate projection of blame onto the messenger, and even casting the messenger in the role of a villain. I'm not saying that you're going to automatically react this way. These are just some symptoms that might come up. Assumptions about the messenger on a personal or character level, tuning out and being repelled by the content and the message being conveyed. These are potential symptoms. So important to note before we start. Please, please, please don't proceed with this meeting unless you're ready and willing to be exposed to deep shadows within yourself and the collective of humanity. Because if you're not ready to hear this, it can be really upsetting. So this is just a warning. I don't think it's, I don't know, maybe it's just my energetic makeup. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I also know with my Mars right on my descendant that I don't realize sometimes how aggressive the information I share can be, and I don't intend to hurt anyone. So I just want to let you know before I start where we're going, right? So yes, thank you for being here, and please stay as present as possible, and even listen to this more than once if you feel called to. All right, so this is a chart from today, about maybe an hour ago. And we're going to look at some relevant transits and cycles that are going on right now that we can correlate to the content that I'm presenting, because we're at a really pivotal time right now as a species, given that, you know, I mean, we're nearing the Pluto return for the United States, a country that impacts all of us, whether or not we want to admit it or not. I'm a Canadian, so we're right next to them. We're America's hat, as they like to say. So we're definitely impacted by what happens in the United States. So the United States Pluto return's a pretty big deal. Not only that, though, for the consciousness of everyone, Pluto is reaching the end of its trek through Capricorn, which is pretty huge when we consider that the south node of Pluto is in Capricorn, that the south node of Saturn is also in Capricorn, conjunct the south node of Pluto. I'm going to make a lot of assumptions that you understand what this means, but I'll highlight it briefly. The south nodes of planets, just very basic description, have a lot to do with our past memories, our conditioning in early life, and even our past lives, what we're coming into this life with. And it can talk about these slow moving planets like Pluto. They can talk about the collective soul evolution, the conditioning of that. And then, of course, the current sign that the planet is in is kind of like the now moment, what's unfolding. And the North Node is the kind of like the road that is unfolding even in front of the now moment, right? And with the North Node of Pluto being in Cancer, Saturn's North Node just dipped back into Cancer after spending a little bit of time in Leo, and the North Node of Jupiter in Cancer as well. It's you know, this Cancer Capricorn axis is a pretty big deal right now. And you know, as per evolutionary astrology, Jeff Wolf Green's evolutionary astrology at least, and it makes so much sense, the axis of Capricorn and Cancer has a lot to do with gender roles, has a lot to do with parental roles, right? And our roots are family and society itself, our racial identity, and these kinds of things. At the moment, we have a square between Neptune and the nodes of the moon. And this is, you know, given that it's exactly opposite Pandora, Neptune, Pandora is in Virgo at the moment, this is a mutable cross that we're seeing where the nodes are being incorporated, with the nodes depicting how we're evolving on an ego identity level, and then in mundane astrology, the moon depicting the emotions of the masses. It's very interesting to see this cross at a time like this, where things over the course of 2020 has, well, I mean, the Capricorn energy has really revealed reality to us, what's really going on here. And so when I look at this opposition between Neptune and Pandora, given that they're in Pandora and Vesta are in a new phase to Lucifer in Virgo, it seems to me that there is potential for us, if we're not careful on the evolutionary path, to lose sight of reality and even get to a point where we are refusing to acknowledge reality because of the pain of it. And part of the pain that we're being called to look at least that what I'm being called to present, is rooted in feminine wounding, the wounding in the feminine. And also the solution as well is in understanding the nature of the roots of the wound of the feminine, or at least as much as we can in the time that we have today. Another transit that is interesting, I mean, this is not exactly a quick moving transit, these are much slower, but I keep thinking about Pluto being, our soul, right? I don't have the graphic here, which is unfortunate, but it's a wonderful graphic where it depicts the root chakra, Pluto being at the core of that. Outside of that, it's a multi-layered shell here at our root. Pluto, our soul's evolutionary journey, the desires deep within us, our deepest vulnerabilities. The next layer of that strata of the core of the root being Uranus, the individuated unconscious, the vehicle in this life that the soul is expressing through from the perspective of the individuated unconscious, right? Very connected to our ego. Strangely enough, Uranus being in conjunct, like Aquarius being in conjunct to Cancer, it's interesting because they have a connection here as far as roots and inner identity. But with the individuated unconscious, it's not always something we're consciously aware of. And then the next layer in this egg, we could say, is Saturn. Saturn being the crust, crusty old Saturn, sorry. The crust that kind of shows us the walls and the boundaries and the ceilings, the limitations in our reality, what we're consciously aware of as far as where we can go, where we can't go, where where we need to kind of mature and what shape we mature into. When we consider the north and south node of Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Pluto, especially with let me see, where is it? The north node of Uranus here, 14 degrees Gemini, being enshrined to the south node, it's a bit of a looser trine, but I would count it, to the south node of Neptune, and then the north node of the moon, culminating into a conjunction with the north node of Uranus in the not too distant future, by early next year. What I'm seeing here is that there is potential for us to, through acceptance of information that could be disillusioning to us, but yet acceptance of it rather than trying to escape or hide or numb the pain that we would sometimes be inclined to do with Neptune, especially being in Pisces. We can really manifest the north node of Neptune in Leo, our creative self-actualization, in a way that is in alignment with Source, the all. We can even see an even more precise trine between the south node of Uranus and the north node of Neptune right now in fire signs. And to me, when I see this, there's just so much potential for us to connect to our nature, to connect to our natural intrinsic connection to natural laws and principles, and our conscience, which is very much, in my opinion, connected to natural law. We just have a natural ability to know, what is true if we're willing to go there. And so let me see. I also wanted to mention briefly too, Mars is direct now, Mars in Aries. We still have Chiron retrograde in Aries, but Mars is moving into a balsamic, it already is. It's in a balsamic phase with Eris, soon to move into a conjunction. And Eris is a feminine archetype, but she's been in Aries for such a long time. It's really interesting because it has a lot of resonance with the feminine movement, the timeline of Eris. And so, she's going to be in Aries until like 2047. So we have this masculine sign iterating through a feminine archetype that's very, I feel, important to our evolution, because discord and friction, uncomfortable situations, are a key piece of seeing reality for what it is, and also learning how to adjust to reality in ways that are respectful of what reality actually is, instead of it being just all about us, right? So again, like Eris, these kinds of planets, Neptune, they're outer planets, so they're not necessarily in our conscious awareness. So we can kind of be influenced by these energies in ways where we don't realize what we're doing until we decide to look, until we decide to ask, and until we decide to look within. Because all of this information, although we can see it corresponding in astrology, we can also access this from within if we're willing to ask the right questions and listen to what comes back, and really be willing to accept the answers that we hear. Okay. So, yeah, smash the patriarchy. I'm sure you've heard that one before, right? I find it interesting because in order to do that, to actually, move into a paradigm that is more egalitarian, we could say, less tyrannical, we need to reflect, self-reflect, and we need to also acknowledge culpability as women and our role in upholding the status quo. Like, we need to do that. We're not just victims in this situation. We do have roles to play, and we do contribute to this day, as I'm speaking, to the paradigm that, does seem to be crumbling, but what comes next really depends on our conscious awareness and how we're aligning our actions to that. So no amount of shared pathological thinking veiled as solidarity is going to bring us upward, right? Like, this is delusional thinking. And so I have some graphics on the screen here, like, is your feminism angry enough? And then I have this statue. Unfortunately, I can't remember who created the statue, but it's Medusa with the head of Perseus, which I find interesting because when we think about the myth of Medusa, now the original myth, she was always a monster, but there was a myth that came not too long after that that implied that Poseidon raped her, and then she was punished by Athena to become a monster. Her beauty was stolen, her beautiful hair was turned into snakes, and it kind of broke her brain, right? She became evil. And so when I see this statue with the head of Perseus, it's interesting because it's like it shows kind of the feminine psyche, where through the rage and the pain that we've endured from the injustices that we've experienced as women throughout thousands of years, right? It can be hard to see clearly who the real adversary is, and we may end up causing pain and even death to people that we are projecting our pain onto, that we're lashing out onto. And so this statue, regardless of what the artist intended when they created it, because I don't know, I just find that a compelling statue when we consider that. And then, of course, we have the yin and yang facing away from each other, because at the moment in reality, as far as the consciousness of both men and women are concerned, there is a schism that is keeping us from seeing each other eye to eye, and even the feminine and masculine yin and yang inside of ourselves. This is why most people are not integrated beings. This is why a lot of people are not as effective in their life at doing what their soul is calling them to do in this life, because of the traumatic ego fragmentation, Uranus, that we are all experiencing to varying degrees. Yes, equality, or a wolf in equality's clothing. What's our motivations here? This goes very deep. Distortions and freedom of thinking that can actually manifest as fascism and tyranny. This is what we're seeing today. We see a lot of people that want to come together in solidarity, a lot of people that say that they want equality. But when we look into the heart of the issue based on the actions, the result, law of causation, we are seeing that that is not at all what's manifesting. We are still seeing massive skews in inequality manifesting in the physical plane. And a lot of this, again, has to do with that Medusa statue and what it implies, what I shared about what I feel it implies. We're passing off the blame. We're not looking clearly at what's really going on here. So when a Virgoan energy, which can be very much in the victim mindset, merges with Capricorn energy, and they're in trine, so it's very easy to do this, we can get even deeper rooted into a victim victor slave master programming to the point of neuroses, which is there's something wrong with me, and it's very Virgoan, Mercury and Virgo, inward analytical to the point of like just insanity, mutating into psychosis. Oh, the enemy's out there, he's the enemy, they're the enemy, and it becomes unclear what's in the mind, what the root causal factors of the pain is. And I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. I mean, it's been thousands of years that, well, I mean, if you think about the mutation from the matriarchal or matrilineal way of life thousands of years ago into a more violent / yang kind of a paradigm that we have dubbed the patriarchy, right? It stands to reason that because that's happened for so long, many sources of history have been destroyed. Our roots have been cut off from us, most of us. So it's hard to access the information to know why we feel the way we do. Why, why we might be feeling so angry or anxious or sad or disconnected or in need, and yeah, so these are things to, again, we gotta, a lot of the answers we can get from things like astrology, psychology, self-analysis, but at the end of the day, it takes time to kind of go inside and pull this information out. And I urge people to do that if they feel called to. So one of the issues that we're seeing here is projection of the villain onto a convenient patsy, no matter how loathsome they actually are in real life, right? When we do that, it doesn't actually address root causal factors, thus repeating of history loops again and again and again until we break the cycle. And I feel like at this point in time where we're at, with this Pluto return, with Pluto nearing the end of Capricorn, and the potential heralding in of the Aquarian age that we're on the precipice on, that may have already started, we have a real opportunity to get real, to be objective, and to see the human in all of us so that we can come together, but also at the same time deal with what's going on inside of ourselves so that when we come together, it's not in a I guess you could say subversive way, right? And as I say here, the future, it turns out, is actually Aquarian. And I'm responding to this image here where this protester is holding a sign, the future is female. And then we also see here, now you can't quite see it, but there's this sign here that it says men ruin everything, right? And I, like, that's the whole point of where I'm going with this, right? If men ruin everything, like, that implies a victim mentality. And, I mean, even Jeff Wolf Green has said this, and it's true. I mean, and this frustrates even me to hear this, but it's true. There are no victims here. People can be victimized. People can have violence brought upon them, but really there are no victims unless someone concedes to being a victim. And so with this Aquarian age that's coming about, it implies a merger of masculine and feminine, and Aquarius being a very androgynous sign. So how do you think that this future will look, this Aquarian future, if we're looking at the current road, the current trajectory we're on, right? Excuse me. When women are still blaming men and wanting a future that is female. Now, again, I want to say I'm not blaming just women on this. We're just focusing on women because there's a lot of information already about the distortions in the masculine and the toxicity in the masculine, right? And so I apologize for my language here, but it's the truth. This is how cucks and simps are created. And if you don't know what those words mean, I would urge you to look them up. Basically, hyperfeminized men, chivalric men, MGTOW, like these distortions where there's a schism again between the feminine and masculine, or there's a subservience, like a hyperfeminization of the masculine to the point where again, and when I say masculine, I want to say it's about assertiveness, action taking. Like just think about like Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, Gemini, and even Libra and Aquarius, right? Like think about the energies of these signs. It actually dampens the expression of these things, right? When we are dismissing masculine energy, yang energy, right? And then when we think about the trajectory we're on in society, this is going to create a society that is, well, I mean, we can see it, people wanting to dissociate from the body further, a potential transhumanist agenda, these kinds of things, just some examples, right? So again, when nature is distorted due to not learning how to grow up and be self-determined, i.e. Capricorn, that's South Node of Capricorn, using it wisely, right? Then the results speak for themselves. And then I have a headline here that I don't really think is that valid right now, so I'm just going to skip it. Okay, so imagine if people came out in such numbers, like as we can see depicted in this graphic here, to raise issues of awareness about issues that actually exist within the shadow self and the shadow collective, like the vulnerability that's in there, rather than, kind of having this infantile response, or this person's the bad guy and we're going to bang our pots and pans in anger at a slave master that we want to listen to us, which is really, again, it's this conceding of our authority and our adulthood over to another, right? So I'm seeing these distortions in the Capricorn energy again with this, right? But again, like if people were coming in to talk about shadow self and shadow collective, they'd probably be at a level of awareness where they realize that going out into the street crying for de facto parents and leadership to fix a problem that they themselves and only themselves have the power to shift, like that's not going to happen, right? And this is just a little riddle for anybody. I'm not going to go too much into it, but you might see a sign like this, like include women of color in your feminism, and it seems innocuous, right? Like you just want to include everyone. But if we think about a distortion in tyranny, Capricorn, leading into a distortion in a smothering family unit, Cancer, North Node of Pluto, North Node of Saturn, then do you think that inclusion might actually be a form of tyranny in and of itself? If we don't want to be part of that and we just want to be an individual? Just something to think about. Sharing, caring, and inclusion. This is part of the path towards source, from what I understand of Jeff Wolf Green's words. And I apologize because I don't have quotes from him right now, but I've heard this many times being said in the EA community. Sharing, caring, and inclusion makes so much sense, right? Like this just is logical when we think about upward progression on an evolutionary level. That feminine quality, that beautiful quality of caring, Cancer, right? Inclusion and sharing our resources. So important. Everyone, I feel, wants to feel included, but I think that it's important that everyone is also allowed to be an individual. It's an interesting lesson we have with that inconjunct between Cancer and Aquarius, And then we also have the antithesis, hating, hoarding, and exclusion, right? And this is a problem that a lot of feminine energy, like in the feminine energy, that we need to acknowledge, that there's actually, we say we want to share, care, and include, but we're not seeing that happen. We're not actually seeing that happen. What we're seeing is covert and overt feminine energy, covert hating, hoarding, and exclusion, right? And this is a global pathological problem that is not at all exclusive of gender. So I have just some memes and things that I've put up here, just some stuff to consider, like I'll just leave these up for you to have a look and just think about. Now, the Joe Biden thing, I just want to say, I don't have any political affiliations. I don't even, like, I'm a very, very, um, we'll say fringe person. I don't believe in this paradigm of voting in people, and I won't get into why. But I find it interesting that people can be all about Me Too and then want Biden to be in just because they hate Trump. Like, it's just weird to me how they can have the cognitive dissonance to ignore the creepy stuff that Joe Biden has done. He doesn't respect women. He violates their physical boundaries, and not just women, but children. Okay, so it's just kind of weird to me. Just my opinion. So this one is another one that might be uncomfortable, but I thought it was really important to bring up because we're like, this is just fact. You can look into it. I urge you to go to the Center for Medical Progress.org and look more into this. Planned Parenthood has been implicated in selling fetal tissue at a profit, even though they profess on paper that that is something that they're against because it's actually illegal. But there is actually there's multiple streams of proof from different people to show otherwise. And so I find it interesting when I bring this up is that, and I'm not for or against abortion. I think it's a case by case basis kind of thing. This isn't my opinion. I just want to bring up the discrepancies in the logic here, where I see people who are all for their, Planned Parenthood, they want their birth control, they want to be able to abort babies. But then at the same time, companies like Planned Parenthood are selling baby body parts, and it's been proven. And then there's also this strange movement called Shout My Abortion, where there's this thing where it's like, we're going to smash the patriarchy and stand as an affront to the patriarchy by reaffirming our right to have an abortion and then celebrate it. Like, let's be real. You're murdering a baby, right? And so that, even just saying it, I know this can really trigger people, but let's be honest, right? Like, when somebody miscarries and loses their child, they say they lost their baby. But if someone has a late term abortion, it's still a baby, right? And so when distortions in feminine energy manifest, we are seeing how dissociated they are from their natural roots, and even a holistic, centered, like a brain balanced way of seeing things. And selfishness, distortions of Taurus can manifest. And let me see, I just want to check. Yeah, I just have a couple more slides and then we're going to look more into the astrology. So again, this goes even further into the concept of selfish activism, selfish and exclusionary solidarity, and so-called equality, right? I find it really interesting that children at the age of 11 can be exploited for a movie and people call it feminist in art, when, this is, to me, it just shows kind of like this inversion of energy in such a way. It's an inversion of logic. It kind of shows the traumatized nature of people, where they don't have a lot of empathy. Now we would think, oh well, feminine energy that's empathy personified, like in a human. We are feminine, or we're feminine, female, so we personify empathy. But the funny thing is that when somebody's been traumatized, not just in their own life but over generations, just because you can feel feelings doesn't mean you necessarily have empathy, right? And that goes back to the concept of hive-minded exclusionary so-called solidarity and equality, right? What it really is we are seeing inversions of Saturnian energy in the form of control and elitism, dissociation, and mass hysteria. And it's well, it is what it is. So there's this movement called Save the Children, massively ignored by mothers and women all over in the mass mind, even dismissed as fake news, or fobbed off as a QAnon conspiracy, right? Like Pizzagate and stuff. Oh, that's just QAnon garbage, right? And this is another one that is another like We see that in the bigger sphere, but this happens a lot with people who have been molested and raped as kids. Their families will ignore it. And the worst of all, oftentimes it's the mothers and the grandmothers and the aunties that want to pretend that a sexual abuse didn't happen. And why does this happen? Because of distortions of Taurus energy, survival prostitution, distortions of Capricorn energy, lacking integrity, coldness, unwilling to feel, distortions of Virgo, slave think, victim mentality. I can't take care of myself. I need someone else to care for me. I'll take the crumbs that I get, even if I'm abused. Right? And so, this can be hard to accept, but if we want to smash the patriarchy, part of the process is to actually develop the masculine quality in ourselves, things like courage, right? Self-sufficiency. Last slide before we get into the astrology. So again, this is just reiterating here, we have this woman who is a yoga teacher, Instagram influencer, has huge influence, and she, dismisses again, they call it a QAnon conspiracy that children are being trafficked. And she's like, this isn't true, this isn't happening, please use more discernment. Meanwhile, we have John Paul Rice over here. This guy has worked in Hollywood for over 20 years. He has personally experienced situations where he has unequivocal proof that it is happening. He even made a movie about it called A Child's Voice. And it's interesting because it all links up with some well-known players in the sex trafficking news media recently that it seems like nobody's really listening to anymore. So I'm just bringing this stuff up for your consideration. Do you find it interesting that a woman is telling you that this isn't true, this isn't happening, use more discernment? She has no idea. And then we've also got another individual who has something else to say about it, who's actually experienced the proof, like has been in contact with people who have actually been in these situations. The sex trafficking, the Hollywood pedophilia. Again, there's a cognitive dissonance there and a strange response that, again, is rooted in trauma, right? So how does one honor our Capricorn patriarchal past so the unfolding of Cancer, the Cancer future is aligned to nature as much as possible? So let's look at some distortions in the zodiac to answer that question. And I just want to check, Linda, I don't have a clock on me. Do I have much time to continue?
Sarah, you can take as much time as you need, okay?
Oh, thank you. Okay, all right. Okay, so here I've got the chart up. First off, before we even look at the keywords, which you might already be looking at, but I've got an interesting graphic here. Now, I have bolded, of course, the feminine signs in water and earth, but notice how we have an upward moving triangle and a downward facing triangle, which in occult symbolism implies upward, feminine, downward, masculine. So even when we're looking at feminine signs, and if we were looking at masculine, this would be true too. Gender manifests in everything, both genders. So we're seeing masculine here in the concept of this graphic, in the sense of not that earth is more masculine than water necessarily, though I've heard arguments to assert that are compelling for sure. But what this is more that I'm pointing to is just that to balance these, we need to balance, or it seems that it makes sense to balance masculine energy and feminine energy for water and earth to actually be expressing in a naturally balanced way. So yes, we can look at the trines between the water energy, and then I also put some semi-sextiles here because we can see the next step, of course, since everything's a cycle in the zodiac, how these semi-sextiles, which are awkward, adjusting energies, the Pisces to Aries semi-sextile being yin, and the Aries to Taurus semi-sextile being yang, we can see how they're impacted based on how these water energies and earth energies are iterating, right? And so some of the toxicity that we can see in these signs, for instance, we'll start off with, let's just start off with Pisces and we'll work our way around. We can see escapism, parasitism, deception, mystique, delusional thinking, repressed anger or repressed emotions in general, numbed emotions. Um, yes, and even the root causes or like the origin of our emotions can be ambiguous when we're seeing Pisces in distortion, numbed empathy, psychosis, superficial or pseudo spiritualism, right? Um, in Capricorn, we could see tyranny. And this is regardless of gender. This comes through men and women, right? Like, I just want to be very clear about that. But we're seeing how the negatives can iterate through feminine signs. Again, Capricorn, tyranny, bullying, controlling reality, right? And I put reality in quotes because we're not actually controlling reality. We're just controlling our perception of reality. And it's usually based in a need to feel safe, right? Because Capricorn especially shows in its iteration of the trauma we're all experiencing generationally and even in current life, like the ripple effect of that, the need to control reality helps us feel safer in our body. Yeah. Um, Rigidity, psychopathy, frigidity, like coldness. And this is to others outside of our race, nation, or group. Totalitarian or totalitarianism, closed mindedness, hypocritical, and lacking integrity. With Scorpio, fear of vulnerability, hatred, vengeance, sexual chemical violence, which we can see through psychological torment. We could see through manipulation. Again, here, covert behaviors, right? Which we see all the time in the feminine, right? This is why Scorpio is a great example of this being feminine Mars, right? Because it's a little more aggressive in the way that it goes about its distortions, we could say. And I guess, I mean, with Scorpio, it really is, it's connected to Lucifer energy too. So we're seeing shadow a lot more in Scorpio, but as we can tell in all of the signs, and we could look at the masculine as well, right? Of course, and see distortions there too. But it's just interesting. Attempts to merge with sources of power for the sake of power. So again, that crowd thing consciousness. Believe women. You ever hear that slogan? Believe women. Like, I'm not saying don't believe women, but isn't it strange that you would just believe women because they're women? And again, like merging with source of power for the sake of power in quote unquote solidarity will quote unquote manifest equality. There's fallacy there logically, right? Next, let's look at Virgo. Hypercriticism, victim mentality, pervasive sense of needing to atone. So this constant neuroticism where it's like, I did something wrong. There's something wrong with me. Like it can really eat a person up inside. And then when we go to the opposite polarity, we see how that neuroticism can turn into psychosis. And we can also see sadomasochism result in Virgo, where it can actually be really nasty, you know? Um, because of the neuroticism and the deeply entrenched trauma, though, in the psyche, it can manifest in nastiness that we're not even necessarily wanting to act out, but we might feel righteous in acting out, or we might feel like, again, because of the psychosis, neurosis kind of concept in the victim mentality, we got to get them before they get us, right? Next in Cancer, we've got overprotectiveness, arrested emotional development, childish expectations. So, like, I want the world to meet my expectations. I want everyone to do what I want to do. And then there's this kind of like, again, childishness where there's a lack of balance there between the polarities of realistic thinking and consideration of like the bigger picture society and other people. Um, there's dependentness, being coddled, tribalistic, and now family mentality is not necessarily a bad thing, but when it's to the point that you have conceded your self-image over to the family, like as I have here, identifying identity is what I mean to say here. Sorry, identity comes from the group or family, so there's no sense of self or an infantile sense of self that we see here, and there can even be like a fear to feel, right? Anything other than fun, comfy feelings, like that feeling you get when you eat a delicious chocolate brownie. Just my opinion. Um, yeah, so that's Cancer, and then with Taurus, what we see is more, um, again, physical Earth element energy, like body dysphoria, hoarding, And when I say hoarding, we can take into account all of the stuff we've looked at up until this point. Hoarding power, hoarding resources, like hoarding attention, emotional attention, physical attention, lack of self esteem, evolutionary inertia being the opposite polarity of Scorpio. We can see self preservation, which is, that excludes other people, self preservation, prostitution, and materialism. And so when we consider these distortions, if we look at the cardinal signs, the cardinal axis, which is a very important one, being the first sign here, Aries, and then Libra, subsequent Libra, we can see the actions that take place and also our interactions with other people one-on-one with Libra. So with Aries, we see a myopic sense of the world, narcissism, violence. Now imagine all these feminine energies coming through this masculine energy being action taking, right? Just think about how this manifests. Unwillingness to concede, violence, extremes in will to power, willful ignorance of the implications of one's actions, right? We don't care about who's impacted. We're not even thinking about that. So we're just thinking about ourselves and what we need because, again, of the lack of emotional awareness in these kinds of things and root causal factors. And then with Libra, the interactions on a one-on-one level manifest as poor, inaccurate listening skills, inabilities to actually relate with people. And we see that all over the place, right? Not a lot of listening, not a lot of relating, a skewed sense of or a shallow view of what justice and fairness actually is, right? Dishonesty, projection of expectations that are actually meant to be manifesting through us. I want you to do this for me. I need you to do this for me when I could actually do it for myself. So again, like if we take into consideration the south nodes of Pluto and Saturn being in Capricorn, Pluto being in Capricorn, and Saturn's transition into Aquarius after it's already passed its own south node, what are we manifesting for the era to come in the beginning? Now, of course, a new age that comes, it's not like we're going to manifest it perfectly right away. It could be a little bit of an adjustment period here, trying to manifest the best of what Aquarius has to offer in the in that next era to come, the era that's unfolding. But it's also like, let's just think about the road that we're on right now. Are we on a road to sharing, caring, and inclusion, freedom and equality for all? Or is it more about me, what can I get and how can I control other people so that I can feel safe, so that I can be exclusionary to others, so I could feel elite, so that I don't have to feel my feelings of what's really going on inside of me, right? So Michael Tessarian put this quote up, and I felt it was kind of important to put up. I know it's a little bit esoteric, but I do want to share it. The tyrant I elect and support is a servant of my necrophilious will. Through him I make it appear that enslavement is a matter of political dynamics, when in fact it's due to my pathological psychophobia and desire to be enslaved. Psychophobia, the fear of going within, of understanding the psyche. All right, so again, going back to the axis of Cancer and Capricorn, because it's so important right now considering the north and south nodes of Pluto and our soul's evolution, right? Capricorn is patriarchy. We can all agree to that. It makes a lot of sense. Corporations, capitalism, all the fun things, right? But who is it that leads from behind the throne? Who is it that leads from behind the throne? Is this world really male dominated? Is it? Or is that just because the male yang is easier to see? Right? Like, let's just think about that. Remember, Capricorn is a yin sign. So even if it does represent patriarchy, if we think about mother and father, the role even of father is a feminine thing in and of itself, in a sense. It's just a more structured version of it versus mom, we could say. More disciplined, structured version. So let's consider the impact of mother on all of us. The one who carries and gestates souls, mother, right? Whether it's our mother or mother overall, right? Like, let's just think that concept. Mother has the strongest psychic bond with a baby in utero, right? Like she's, although the world can impact, and then what she's experiencing from her interactions with the world can kind of go in and impact the baby in utero, what's going on inside of her is going to have the strongest connection to the baby that's gestating, that's developing. And even in the first year of their development, this is true. So the greatest impact that of what is impressed upon us is coming from the feminine, right? Even, and then we think about all the horrible things women have to go through, all of the atrocities that women have gone through. It's such a big ask for a woman to be strong for the child. And I wouldn't necessarily tell anyone what to do, but we can see if 1 + 1 = 2, that this is just how it is. The mother impacts, right? So she's the one who either retards or nourishes our potential to grow into full adulthood. Because if we're well armed in the beginning, we got good, strong roots, then we're strong enough to creatively self-actualize regardless of the challenges, right? But if she's dealing with pathologies, and that stuff gets passed on to us, whether we're a man or a woman. And of course, other people in the inner circle are gonna, during your developmental years are gonna impact too, but no one quite has the impact that mom does. So if we consider the cardinal square energy between Cancer and Capricorn and the impacts again on Aries and our actions, Aries, and our relations, Libra, we can see how when we look at Aries, that's square to Cancer. I mean, Aries is the first sign, right? This is how we're instinctively interfacing with the world. We're not thinking about it. It's just us and our beingness. But if our family is in distortion, that feminine nourishing energy is in distortion. If our mom's in distortion, it's going to impede our ability to actualize our own self-identity, our own sense of self, which in turn is going to impact how we interact with others, Libra, which is in turn going to impact our integrity structurally as far as who we're manifesting and what we're building in the physical realm, right? What we're creating, the results of our actions. So if we consider again natural laws like causation, rhythm, and generation, rhythm being cycles, right? Generation being the generation of life and the generations of people, like many, many generations and eras of people. We can easily see how we got here, but we can easily also see how we can get out, right? We have a lot at our disposal right now. That North Node in Gemini is awesome. So much information at our fingertips. And that South Node in Jupiter in Sagittarius is very useful to us too, because we can really tap into our own inner guidance system, our own natural sense of right and wrong, and our own sense of our own nature. And we can gather information and data to help us reclaim these things, right? It's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater and just like not connecting to other people and saying, oh, I'll just be an individual. It's not so much about that. It's about, again, feminine and masculine, yin and yang coming together inside of ourselves. And when we have whole brain thinking and whole brain acting and a whole emotional system, our fragments are pulled in and we're whole, we're much more effective in the world, a lot healthier. And then in turn, our fruits will speak for themselves, I guess you could say. And I want to say, like, this isn't about blame and shame, right? Because those are Virgo Capricorn distortions. They don't really help us. Of course, it's important to be honest about what we see in the world. But if we're just making ourselves feel bad, like that's a distortion of Cancer as well, right? We want to think about how we can use these energies in ways that help us see reality clearly, but also help us to feel loved, strong, and connected. Just my opinion. And I feel, there's always a solution in whatever's facing us in the world that is honorable and ethical. But we do need to be of a mind that perceives outside of the hive mind of a sixth species, because the sixth species is in denial of its collective pathology. Yeah. And so I'm going to close out with this. We have this beautiful sign, which is so true. I feel this is very, very true. When a woman rises, we all rise. Like, let's think about that and what we've gone through here in this presentation, and also taking into consideration healthy iterations of those yin zodiacal energies, right? Manifesting through women. Women, I would say women the most dangerous. of the genders, but yet also the most potential and power, right? I'm sorry, I just think about Aries versus Scorpio, and I'm like, who would win in a fight? Yeah, I wouldn't want to fight with the Scorpio. I'll put it that way. Anyway, um, so yeah, the sign is true, but I can't help but doubt the sign maker comprehends what actually like this actually entails, like to manifest this rising up. I can't say for sure. I doubt it, you know, like that's just my opinion. Maybe she does. I hope she does. Because if I think about this one right here, this little one holding the sign and what she could bring to the world when she knows the real power she wields and what she can do to bring life and nourishment to the world and to herself, um, you know, I feel like that's what's bringing about the change we all want to see in a lot of ways, at least massively contributing to it. And again, you're not going to find this rising in a group, in a crowd, or safe spaces. It's we can all convene together and work together to perform in the aggregate, but it's got if we're not coming at that from a healthy space, we're just creating more illness. So that's where you're going to find it, right? This rising is from masculine and feminine, yin and yang coming together in ourselves, and that requires honesty, true honesty, and a willingness to look at what exists in the world in ourselves, but also true heart and a willingness to love ourselves regardless of what comes up, regardless of what we feel, and regardless of what we're going through, and as we come to know ourselves, because a lot of shadows can come up when we are being honest, but they're not so bad when we realize that it doesn't make you a bad person. Our actions determine that. All right. And so, yeah, some final thoughts here. I don't really, you know, it's again, like I was saying, we've kind of belabored the point on this. I just wanted to bring up this chart just in case I needed to, but I don't really think it's that necessary. I just want to say briefly, you know, again, that south node trine of Neptune to the north node of Gemini, with the north node of the moon in Gemini, north node of Uranus in Gemini, sorry, and then the north node of the moon in Gemini. This is, you know, we have a real opportunity here to heal our traumas if we're willing to be disillusioned, if we're willing to go there with Pandora's box, and especially with her and Virgo, you know, analyze what's in that box, not just open it up and then be, oh my God, I, you know, I brought all these horrible things to the surface, but analyze them. Don't pay attention to the lies of the Lucifer energy when it's in distortion trying to pull us into the dark side, where there's self-loathing or projection of blame and hatred and hypercriticism. Like, don't let that obscure your vision, right? Like, we can see the bad stuff and it doesn't mean we're bad. We can see the truth of what's got us here and not condemn ourselves to thinking that we're just a species that's a virus, like, you know, I've heard say in passing, because that's not true. If we don't want to be, we don't have to be. In fact, our real potential is so much more than that, you know? And we see that unfolding with the age of Aquarius, what can come, what we can build with Uranus being in Taurus, you know, what we can create, how we can reconnect to our own body. There's so much potential for us to create something very beautiful and to heal, and get back to default so that we can move forward. And so that is all for today. Thanks for watching. I want to thank Linda for making this awesome graphic. I love it so much. It's super great. And if you want to check out more content that I create, because this is kind of the angle I take on things, I very much poking into the realms of root causal factors so that we can individuate and create a wonderful world for ourselves and generations to come. Check out my YouTube, Adept Guidance. And for services and offerings, check out my website, adeptguidance.com. All right, that's all.
Great, Sarah. Oh my God, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So brilliant. Okay, well, we'll catch you next time, Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everybody.